Okay, hello and welcome to session 2 of Data Camp. We hope that you got some great information out of your first session, and we are looking forward to a wonderful session here today from this fantastic team. And with us today, we have Karen Jones. She's the manager of Student Life at Lone Star College-Montgomery. We have Dan Mitzvin. He is the director of Student Life at Cy-Fair. And we have Kelsey Jackson, who's the manager of student activities at North Harris. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you guys.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Student life is a big part of any campus. We're not seen as a big department, but we can see through our students. So we're going to show how student life plays a factor in persistence and retention at Lone Star College. All right, our scope, what we plan to cover today is mainly how student life, again, using data, how student life has played an impact in persistence retention here at Lone Star College. When I go out anytime in the community, sometimes I leave my badge on, my name badge on, and people ask me, oh, you work at the college, what do you do there? And I tell them student life. First response is, oh, you guys must have fun in that department. And we do, but there's also a lot of planning that goes involved. Lone Star College has come a long way since we've implemented the student activity fee. And it was, initially thought that the institution was responsible for retaining their students. But really and truly, students are the ones that decide to persist. And we want to make sure that we provide them with that incentive to be a part of the campus, to engage on the campus. And we make sure that we provide purposeful events and purposeful data-driven activities to provide to our students to make sure that they are impacted and decide that they would like to persist as a student and also continue here with Lone Star College. The next area we're looking at will be done by Dan, and Dan, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Karen. As long as I've been working in student life, we have always counted heads at events. We always want to track our attendance. But maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, we found out that we could build events in iStar, and we could use that to track student participation and collect some good data. So at that time, all of the student life leads from all the campuses did some training, and we learned how to use the process. And then we began tracking student ID numbers so we can get specific student information and their participation in student life events. Then the next step, we worked with the area department to develop Power BI reports. That's sort of the evolution of where we came from, just, counting heads to actually collecting ID numbers so we can do a better job of that tracking. So we really started just paper and pencil collection. We'd go out to an event, we'd have a list, students would write their ID numbers down, or we'd write them down for them. That's not really a very good method of doing that, because you have to take that list and type those into a spreadsheet, and there's just a lot of room for error. Plus, a lot of students think they know their student ID numbers, but they really don't. They'll write down wrong numbers or just make up numbers when they attend events. So most of the campuses are using some sort of scanner to track attendance at events. The scanner shown on the screen there is the one that I know 3 or 4 of the campuses are currently using. It's a great little scanner because we use it to scan on the back of student IDs. Oh, well, I won't show it because of my background. There's a little barcode. You can just scan the barcode, and this is a wireless handheld scanner. It just keeps all the information within the machine itself. Or for students that don't have their IDs, I know at my campus, I'll usually ask for some sort of proof. So we'll have them pull up their schedule on their phone to show that they're currently students. And then we can manually enter in the student ID numbers. Well, then when the event's over, when you get a chance, you basically you can upload that information into a spreadsheet and format it properly so that it can be used for our reporting. I know for my campus and some of the others, we have extra scanners for RSOs, and RSO is student life lingo for registered student organizations. So our student clubs and organizations, we allow them to check those out to use for meetings or for their events. And what's nice about that is that each fall and spring, we collect roster information from our student organizations. That's required by the system, and for them to maintain active status. And for the clubs that actually decide to use this process, it makes it very easy for them because their rosters do have to include student ID numbers, so we know we're not having to fish for who the students are that were involved. So it makes it really easy if they use that throughout the semester for us then to run a query for their organization, and then their submission of their rosters in the fall and spring is very, very simple at that point. So how it works, each year Student Life is assigned an event ID number for the year. And all of our events fall under, anything that's under our umbrella falls under that event ID number. And for the year, they actually, it's not the fiscal year, they start the week before fall classes start, I believe is when the start time is for the new event ID to take place. When we go into iStar, we go into campus community under meetings, and we build each event one by one. And what I usually do is I sit down, I have my master calendar for the year. I'll take a couple hours and go in and build each event. But you can always add at the end. I like to do it that way though, so I keep them in order, and I'm not always trying to have to remember to go back and build in an event. But when building those, we put in a short event description, a description and then a short description. And I want to talk about the short description because that's where it's really important that we use particular naming conventions so we can run really good queries to find information about different programs. So for example, I have a naming convention for leadership, for our drug and alcohol awareness programs, for just general student activities. I have a naming convention for each of the RSOs that we have registered. So all those different areas where you might want to pull reporting from, you just set up that in advance. You just have your naming convention sheet and use that consistently every time. Also, when building the events, you put in a meeting type, date, and start and end time, and you can put in projected attendance if you want, and actual attendance afterwards if you want, but you don't really need to do that. And then there's a comment section, and I actually use that sometimes because for some of the events that we do that we require reporting for, such as our drug and alcohol awareness events, sometimes I'll make notes in that event so there's a permanent record of kind of what happened with the event. So you got all your events built, and then you like I shared, we collect all that participation information at the events. We had to format it a certain way, a really particular way. So we build it into a spreadsheet, saved as a CSV file. First column is the student ID numbers. Second column is event ID for the year. And then the third column is that each of those meetings you build has a number to it. So you put that number of that event. And then iStar knows to attach that spreadsheet to that particular event. So the next step was when I was working at North Harris, and then when I moved over to Sci-Fair, worked with an analyst, O'Brien Hughes, in the air department to build Power BI reports to basically pick up that information from iStar and put it into some pretty little reports. So those reports, what I chose to do at the time is to look at student participation in student life events and what connections there are, correlations with persistence and their GPAs. So really there are two reports that I use and we've been using at other campuses in the system. One is for involvement, so all the involvement in all areas, including the RSOs, and then the other is for RSOs specifically. And when looking at those reports, either one of them, we can look at it including or excluding graduates. We can look at it in terms of ethnicity, gender, and their FTIC status. And then for involvement levels, and that's really that involvement report only, it doesn't include the RSO report, but we look at levels from either non-participants, 1 to 3 events, 4 to 6 events, and 7 or more events. And those are just numbers I chose arbitrarily at the time because I wanted to look as students get more or less engaged in student life events, how does that correlate with their GPAs and their retention. So I just wanted to quickly give you, and this isn't, this slide and the next aren't for the purposes of really analyzing the data. It was really just to show you what those Power BI reports look like. This one is for overall involvement. This shows for 3 fall terms. You see in the top right of that report, that head count is really the actual attendance count. That's not unique students. That's the total attendance over those 3 terms for just the student life events. And then you can see the slicers there. It's the same, Karen, you don't have to go back. This is the RSO report. Okay, the RSO report, and that's really handy for us for a couple different reasons. Occasionally, I'll have a club advisor that'll ask me, you know, how are my students doing academically? And I can pull this report to show that, to see, does the advisor need to maybe guide it and redirect them to say, okay, maybe we're focusing a little too much time on the club and we need to focus more on academics. Or they can, I've occasionally had advisors they'll do study tables. That more often is used for our club sport teams than any of the other groups, but I have occasionally had it happen with other groups that have worked with their students to try to get those GPAs up particularly. The retention numbers are always strong in there. Sometimes it's the GPA that's an issue. But also, every semester we award a grade cut for any groups that have a 3.0 GPA collectively as a group or better. So that's how we've used them.
Okay, so we're going to take a look now at the data that all of our campuses have collected together. And before I do that, though, I just wanted a quick sort of understanding of what we look as persistence and retention versus retention. They're similar, but a lot of data, a lot of research has shown that persistence is something that is based on the student, while retention is what the institution does in order to keep those students here as they get closer and closer to graduation at the higher education. Now, a lot of the data that we're going to be using today is strictly going to be for the fall, for the academic year 2019 to 2020, mainly because that's when Houston North came in, and they do have an active student life, so we wanted to make sure that we incorporated them in our data presentation. So we first wanted to look at sort of what our benchmark was given the entire system. And as you could see from here, the entire system of our retention from fall to spring is usually at a 72% retention on persistence rate. For the fall to fall, it drops significantly, and mainly because students graduate, students transfer, but then that comes 46%, 47%, 46 to 47%. We also looked at the gender, how our female students are doing, how our male students are doing, and more or less they're on an even balance, and they still fall into that fall to spring percentage of 72%. This one is for the fall to fall, and again, it falls in more or less even. A couple percentage points go to the female, but it's in that 47% range for the fall to fall persistence. Then we also looked at, we need to look at ethnicity, because we want to make sure that we touch each one of our student ethnicity groups. And again, as you see here, it still overall falls into that 70%, and how the distribution goes. And the fall to fall, again, in the 47%. And then age group, we also looked there as well, still factors in. One thing that I noticed was the highest was under 20, and I think that includes our dual credit. So we have a great persistence with our under 20 age group. And then more or less the other age groups fall into that 60 to 65% area. And this is fall to fall. still the under 20 are significantly higher than, it's a little bit more than the average of the 47. All right, so all that data that we've been collecting, this gives you a good idea of what student life has done in terms of persistence. So the blue, we have students that have come to 1, maybe 3 events, 4, maybe 6 events, and then 7 or more events. And you'll notice that their fall to spring persistence is in the 80s, whereas the non-participants are in the 71, 72% that we think. For our fall to fall percentage areas, we're more in the 60% range for persistence for our students, compared to the non-participants who are in the 46%. And this is all this data comes from all the events that each campus has put into iStar. So a little closer look, this one was Cypher. So you see again, still shows that the participants are doing a lot more persistent than the non-participants during our student life events. And this is for the spring, higher than the 47% as well, more in the 70% range for 4 more events. And for North Harris, also the same. As you see, it's significantly higher than the 72% for the fall to spring, and also higher for the fall to fall, which was 72 and 47%. All of our campuses look at this, and this is for their spring cohort. All right, so on Montgomery, we did it a little differently. We decided we wanted to concentrate on FTIC, so we created a committee that involved our academic advising group, communication done on the campus for all students. Student life, of course, was involved in there, and academic support like tutoring, library services, whatever services that students need to be academically successful. So for this group, we set ourselves some targets, which happened to be our campus ACEs, in that we wanted to make sure that with our FTIC students, and to encourage persistence and retention, we wanted to make sure that our FTI students had a 70.8% course success, and then of course increased persistence from fall to fall, a little higher than what the overall Lone Star College was doing, which was, we wanted to get to 79% and for fall to spring, and we wanted 59% from fall to fall. And then of course, we also significantly wanted to impact African-American FDIC persistence as well. So in that, our course success, we didn't quite make it there. But this just helped us to recognize that we had to do something different to get to that 70%. We were there, and then COVID happened. So what we would have probably adjusted to compensate for spring to make that a little higher, COVID happened, and we had to kind of dump those ideas, and our committee kind of fell apart at that point. So for the FTIC persistence, excuse me, we wanted to get to the 79%, but we still remained at the 72 or the 73%, excuse me, which is just like 1% higher than all of Lone Star. And this was for the fall to fall. The norm for Lone Star was 47. We were at 50. We didn't quite meet our 59% or 60% that we wanted to get to. From African-American students, we actually stayed there in the same range again with Lone Star College on a whole, and did not make it 79% like we wanted to. And also for the fall to fall look, we also did not quite get to, we fell significantly in that fall to fall area. I think, again, the impact of COVID had a strong impact on this as well. All right, so I'm going to pass it on to Kelsey, who's our other presenter.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. So now we're going to look at some recommendations. Some of these are things that we have done this past year based on these data trends we saw prior to COVID, and just some initiatives that are rooted in the core mission of what student life is and how we adapted. But you'll see in the recommendations, these are things that we're going to continue after we are closer to returning to normal. So one of the things that we did this past year is that we began a one LSC student life system-wide event structure. This allowed us to increase access to events during the COVID-19, pandemic and policies and things. We were, when that all happened, like everyone else, we were working from home. Everything, what we do is events. We create community on campus. We bring students together over something, whether it's an organization or an activity. And that just immediately halted, and we had to change our plans up a full 180. So what we did is we came together, all 7 campuses, and created an event structure to where we were able to offer 4 to 5 virtual events each semester this past year for our students, for all Lone Star College students. So that collaboration between the campuses is something that we want to continue. And then on the theme of collaboration, like Karen mentioned, the first time in college student efforts, that's definitely something that I think each of our institutions do individually when it comes to intentional collaboration at our campuses. And of course, with that being in our nature, this system-wide collaboration is something that we will continue to do beyond the policies being lifted and things like that. Again, continuing, one of the other things that it showed us is the opportunity we had to connect with our online students. We know that not all students come to our campuses. We know that students take classes at multiple campuses, and they, if they're taking classes at Montgomery, Cy-Fair, and North Harris, they might not make it to one of our campuses. So we want to look at continuing to do some sort of virtual engagement, whether that be hybrid. If we have an in-person event, how can we include our virtual or students who aren't able to be at campus at that time, to that day, what have you. So with that, to continue to increase our access to student life services to our online students, not only in the form of events, but in the form of how to continue to create community and engagement opportunities for them virtually. We're also in the process of creating a collaborative system-wide Power BI report. So Karen did a wonderful job of pulling all of our individual campus data together for y'all today. But one thing we are working on with AIR is to create a collaborative Power BI report that we can look at all 7 campuses on one report, filtered out by campus, filtered out by semester, those sorts of things. And so that is something that is currently being worked on that we're excited to see when it comes out, how we compare and how we can help each other, the different campuses. If we see, super increased participation or persistence at one campus, how can we look at what that campus is doing, or what are some things that we can start to incorporate across the system that will continue to increase our persistence and retention rates, and get our students graduated and successful, and give them the opportunity to connect with Lone Star in a different way outside of the classroom. So that's just some of the recommendations that, again, we've started to do, we're going to continue to do, and things that will come in the future.
All right, thank you, Kelsey. So that brings us to the end of our presentation, and of course we're going to open up the floor. I guess Shannon, you'll let us know if we have any questions.
Hi, Karen. It's Lauren. I have hopped in as Shannon is going on to her session. So let me turn on my camera.
You changed on me.
We're just being a little flexible today. So you know how that goes. So I'm here. If you guys want to put anything in the chat, I'm happy to read those. Just make sure you include that to everyone. It looks like Looks like we have one question from Melanie that I can read. She says she attended a presentation regarding EDUC 1300 and the presenter discussed the challenges she faces in getting the students to enroll in their next semester courses. Have you considered involving advisors or EDUC 1300 instructors at each event to allow students who may attend to ask questions or get involved? Thank you for your question, Melanie.
Yes, I will start, and I'm also gonna let Dan and Kelsey answer for them. But definitely, we always are open. We always need volunteers to help us our events so that they can connect with students. We try to invite every single department, every resource area to come to our events so that students are open to them. So definitely we do make sure that we include them in our events so that students are, if they didn't know about them, they'll know about them once they attend that event. Dan and Kelsey.
Yeah, so similar to that, one thing we do at North Harris, and I'm sure other campuses do this too, every semester we have an involvement fair. So in the past it's been in person, but in this time we've done it virtually. And I know that each of us we highlight those services at those things. Also, we work really closely here at North Harris with our advising department, our student services areas, to invite advisors to the event. So they'll be out in our courtyard with their laptop, you know, a printer, like there's a whole mobile station they bring to our events to where if students are there and just have questions, they can just talk to advisor at our event. So yeah, that's one way we've done it in the past. And we continue to look ways for that are creative to get students connected with our advisors and different things like that to provide those services.
Yeah, I agree with both Karen and Kelsey. And it seems like from the, in terms of getting folks from advising to come and do that, there's definitely more interest I've found as we get to registration periods. So as you know, as we approach fall registration, spring registration, summer, they seem to be more excited to come out and do that. But for every event, we do a lot of events. I'm not sure that we would get somebody to come for every event. That'd be a lot.
And I have noticed too that financial aid has been a big part. They not only want to encourage students that there's a way to help them with their finances to go into school, but also it's a way to expose them to the work study program, so that students could sign up, make sure that they sign up for that, because they don't know it's combined when you apply for FAFSA. You're welcome, Melanie. Any other questions?
I'm seeing in the Q&A, Nicholas Spur asked, has anyone looked at students who took the SAT or ACT to look at persistence and retention? And Nicholas, not from the student life side, I wonder if anybody that's here has done that. That'd be interesting to see.
So we actually do work in our department and student services because we do ACT outreach campaigns that I've been leading for a few years. And when we do our outreach to them, we have tracked our enrollment as far as how that connects to the outreach level that we've done in connecting with them. So usually what I've done with that is we get our ACT lists and then we will sort them by what they've listed as their intended potential major. And then we do targeted outreach, providing them with links to the programs that closest align with that intended major. So it's a little bit of work, but I think it's really worth it because they've said, hey, I'm interested in EMT, and we can say, awesome, here's your link to the EMT program. Here are your first couple of steps. We've absolutely tracked enrollment. I think it's a great idea to reach back around and kind of close that loop and look and see what the retention is. So I love that idea, Nicholas. Thank you so much. There is also one more question that I see from Ashley. Were there any significant differences between groups of students who had participated in student life events and those who did not in terms of student characteristics? Examples, student enrollment status, full-time, part-time.
I did notice that our students who are full-time, they're the ones that repeated quite a bit. Came to a lot of our things. The part-time ones, you'll find that they're the ones that if they're here and they happen to fall into our event, great. But they're the ones that come to class and then just have to go to work right after. So there's no time. But definitely I see a significance between full-time and part-time here on Montgomery.
Yeah, and I don't know if this specifically touches on this question, but I know at North Harris, we try to diversify our event times. So not everything is in the middle of the day. I know other campuses do this as well. So we also do a series when we're normal. We do a series of events for our evening students. Not saying all evening students are part-time or they're all full-time or whatever, but we do try to look at ways to target different groups of students that are coming onto campus. We've even had conversation about like, how can we set up an event in the parking lot for the students who just come to class and then leave? Can we meet them where they're at? So that's a lot of the conversation at North Harris, and I'm sure it happens at other campuses as well, of how can we reach those special populations of students that aren't our typical middle of the day students that are on campus.
And Ashley, for me, looking at the data, so looking at ethnicities, the trends are pretty much the same across the board, to where as they get more involved, they tend to have slightly higher GPAs until like that 7 or more, and then it dips a little bit. But in terms of retention, in all the ethnic groups, it's followed the same pattern. And also when I looked at FTIC, to where the persistence for 1 or 2 semesters tends to go up pretty significantly between the non-involved and 1 to 3 events, even more for 4 to 6, and then 7 or more is just a pretty big number in all groups.
Okay, guys, we'll give one last call for any final questions, so we give people the time to move on to their next session. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for presenting. I think Student Life is such a great support for our students, and such a great, honestly, as a staff member, it's just such a great thing to, like you were saying, Kelsey, to have that community on campus.
Yeah, we've definitely missed it this past year, but we've done our best. But we're excited moving forward to bring it back.
There. We're
Start
getting
building.
there.
Yes, we are. But thank you everyone for hearing us out. We definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. All right.